Okay, so Kelly Holsey is the fiance of Keith Davis Jr., who was a Baltimore resident that was also abused by police last year and continues to be in jail. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think both Keith's case and Abdul's case are you really have to think of as like examples of what a norm is in Baltimore people are dealing with. And so, we want to go through what Keith's case is about, how it started, when this happened as well. The case we just heard about was before the Freddie Gray uprising, and now we're going to hear a case that happened after the uprising.
But Kelly, maybe you can start out, and we appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. Maybe you could start out by telling our listeners kind of how you looked at the Baltimore uprising when it happened. This was before anything had happened to Keith. What did you think of it?
I really didn't. I watched it from home on my TV, like lots of people. I am guilty of someone who didn't particularly take notice to it because it didn't directly affect me. I live in the county far away from the rioting and the protesting and everything like that. So I really didn't have much of a thought other than it was mind-blowing that was what was occurring and what was unraveling in front of my eyes on the TV screen.
And so then why don't you describe what happened shortly after the uprising with your fiancé?
June 7th, 2015, Keith was unjustly pursued, chased into a garage, and shot at over 44 times by Baltimore police officers. 4 officers discharged their service weapons. During that time, he called me. So a lot of that, I was on the phone while it was occurring. He was hit in the face, in the arm. A bullet went through his face and out, and it's now lodged on his neck today. After that nightmare, after him surviving, surviving that garage, he was then thrown in jail after being sent to an intensive care unit where he stayed there for 4 days, and then a drop-down floor. He was sent to jail the 13th, I believe. They took him in the middle of the night with his face still swollen and metal and his jaw wide shut. And then the nightmare just continued from there. He sat for over 250 days with no trial. There were just postponement after postponement. The narrative that the police sped was that he shot at them with a gun and he allegedly robbed a hack driver. And even though as the details came in, the description that was given didn't fit Keith. This gun that they claim he fired at them was never to be tested. It came out that this gun was not recovered on his person or his body, but just in this garage that he ran into that he had no connection to. And when we finally went to trial, they finally spoke up and said, hey, we're going to take away this discharge of a firearm, even though they let him sit. And we really believed that was the charge that allowed him to stay incarcerated, that allowed him to continue to be in the infirmary with infections and dressing his own wounds, because the narrative was that he shot at officers. And a judge actually said, I can't release him on bail because of this discharge of firearm. This very charge, that the gun they tested back in June, was tested to never have been fired.
I hear you, that charge was dropped before the trial, and then how many other charges did he have, and how did that trial go forward? What happened?
Okay, so including the discharge of a firearm, he was charged with 16 charges, and the discharge of firearm never went to the jury. It was the prosecutor asked to drop it, and out of those 16, 15 of those charges he was found not guilty. In the trial, the victim was face-to-face with Keith. He acknowledged that's not him, it's the wrong guy. Other witnesses said that police officers coerced them into what to say, what he looked like, what he was doing. However, the state's attorney had added 5 additional charges in December, a whole 6 months after the incident, and that was an unlawful possession charge. That is the only guilty verdict that was rendered that day. It is what you call an inconsistent and an illogical verdict. You can't have one with the other. Handgun a possession charge of handgun, wear, carry, and transport, which he was found not guilty of. And then the 16th charge on a lone piece of paper all by itself was the unlawful possession. So you can't get to B without having A, and the A was handgun, wear, carry, and transport is what he was found not guilty of. So he has to have the verdict reconsidered. So file a motion for that, which was done within 10 days of that. And we actually go to court for that on Wednesday, the 20th, disposition to have the verdict reconsidered.
So now this happened after the uprising, and was it just 2 months after the uprising? That's right, in June. And he's been in jail now for almost 300 days.
Yeah, almost a year.
And he still has a bullet in his neck.
Yes.
After all that time, he's been that health problem's not even been handled. He still has a big bulge in his neck that is where the bullet is. And so after these acquittals, which are amazing, it's really fantastic that happened, and that one charge just seems so inconsistent with the other acquittals that I hope the judge is wise enough to, dismiss that as well. We'll see. But then, what happened next in this sad saga?
Well, our victory from court was very short-lived. Minutes before I took the stand to testify in Keith's defense, that I was on the phone and I could hear the shooting and him pleading, I was subpoenaed to the grand jury for testimony. When we got there, they told us it was in regards to a homicide. So not even a week, maybe 4 days after his verdict, the Baltimore Police Department, Commissioner Davis and TJ Smith with media went to the press conference and said, we're charging him with first-degree murder. This gun we recovered in this garage with this sad partial palm print of just the bottom of his pinky and the bottom of his middle finger. It was used in a homicide earlier in that day, and we believe it was him who committed this crime.
So I think that the person who examined the prints was just given the prints. They never saw that they actually came off of that gun. And how does that fit in with what Keith was doing that day? I mean, is there any possibility that he?
Keith did not have a gun. Point blank, period. He didn't have a gun. He didn't hold a gun. He didn't shoot a gun. He didn't put a gun in his pocket. It wasn't one in a bag. He didn't have anything to do with this gun. We're not sure if this gun was in the garage to begin with, as the police were the ones that were responsible for conducting their own, for surveying their own conduct. This print, we still don't know where the origin came from. The latent print expert did not lift the print herself. The crime scene investigator did not lift the print herself. They were given this print and said, hey, this is Keith Davis Jr.'s print, and that's the gist of it. At the very least, even if you want to get technical and you want to get into this print, it is a partial palm print. It is a print that is not consistent with their narrative of someone pointing, holding, or shooting, let alone murdering someone with this gun. It is very consistent with someone laying a gun in your palm. And seeing as though Keith was unconscious and unresponsive a lot of that time toward the end of the situation. So the print is at best really shoddy. Not to mention the expert that testified, technically she wasn't an expert. When she gave her testimony, it was more of opinion. In order to give an expert testimony in a criminal case, you would have to say to the degree of scientific certainty. That is not something that she did. You could have gotten up there and gave us information about the print, and it would have been equivalent to her testimony. So this partial print is really, it doesn't fit at best.
But talk also about the time of the murder and why you know that Keith could not have been involved in that murder.
Well, one of the pieces of evidence is a screenshot that I had. I was on the phone with Keith on June 7th for 1 minute and 7 seconds. That night in the hospital, because I knew what was taking place, I sent this screenshot to everyone that was there with us in the event that something happened to my phone. Ironically, within that screenshot is also another call at the time of this said murder. And at that time, Keith and I were on the phone again for exactly 90 minutes. So my handy dandy screenshot comes into play again to help him get his side. You know, he did not commit this murder. What they're citing is cell site data information that they claim was analyzed by federal partners that says that he was around the scene. First, the news conference says he was at the scene. Now they have changed it that he was around the area of this murder, which everyone knows that cell site data is not reliable, and incoming calls are even more reliable. The cell phone subscriber will let you know you cannot use this. It's not reliable information. And the call that I made at that time was an incoming call. Not to mention, these are the very same phone records that in his first case, state's attorney claimed they never had. The police never had it. The state's attorney never had it. These were phone records. These were part of discoveries that they never would give to us, and they claimed they didn't exist, that they didn't have it. So now they're saying these are the very ones that are tying him to this situation.
It just seems so obvious that, you know, the police made a mistake when they chased him and shot him. Now they're trying to cover up that mistake and make him look like a criminal. And what's the response been? You've tried to reach Marilyn Mosby, the state's attorney. What's been the response to this injustice?
Well, I actually did just reach her last week at a public forum. There wasn't much dialogue between the two of us, but I was able to let her know that I acknowledge that you don't get a second bite out of the apple. You don't get to spin the narrative around again. You spent your narrative before. We fought you in court. What Keith is doing is very unprecedented. The Marilyn Mosby's administration puts most guys up against the wall, and they cop out to a deal. They take whatever's given to them so that they can get out of jail. And in this instance, we have been adamant that we're not going to take a deal. Keith took the narrative that the police spun, the state's attorney, and he took them all the way to court, and he fought and he won. So we believe now we can't make a martyr out of this guy. Officers getting on the stand lying. 3 officers claim I handcuffed him. No, I handcuffed him. No, I handcuffed him. We went in the garage. No, we didn't go in the garage. So they had to kind of do damage control. But like I let Ms. Mosby know, you don't get a second bite out of the apple. You don't get to do this again. So the evidence that you have is little to none, but based on my research into the state's attorney's office, this is something that occurs a lot. The evidence that she has is little to none. You see that within the cases of the 6 officers. The evidence that she has is little to none. The only difference between these 6 officers and Keith's is that the 6 officers never were incarcerated. So they didn't have to spend their time with the cases being built against them in jail. These other gentlemen, like Keith, sit in jail with little to no evidence, and the ones that take it all the way to trial, more than likely those cases are dropped. So at first I thought it was her going after the officers for her husband's political aspirations or her very own political aspirations. Now I believe that it's just inexperience. I believe that she is so quick to prosecute and convict to pad her conviction rate that she doesn't care that there's no evidence to support this. And unfortunately for these men, the guidelines and the law can allow them to sit in jail in these overcrowded pre-trial facilities until she finds it or doesn't find it, and until they cop out and take a deal.
It's really courageous of you to continue fighting this. I know how hard it is to have Keith be in jail, both for you and your family and for Keith. So there's some ways that people can support Keith right now. Can you talk about what people are doing now to let him know that he's not been forgotten, and how people can support the court date on Wednesday?
So there's a couple things coming up. Tuesday, which is tomorrow evening at, I believe, 7 p.m., there's a noise demonstration. Keith is being housed at the Maryland Reception Diagnostic Classification Center. It's a big, tall building on Madison and 4th Street. We went down there yesterday, a couple of us, to kind of just give him some support, and he could see us and hear us. So we have now set up a demonstration for support, jail support, as well as a community cleanup. If you go to this area, it is is atrocious, the trash and everything that litters in front of this jail. So we're going to go and clean up. So we ask that you come out with your gloves, your trash bags, and your support for Keith. That is tomorrow, the 19th, at Madison and 4th Street. Also, Keith's disposition for his verdict reconsideration is on Wednesday, April the 20th, courtroom 528 at the Clarence Mitchell, no, it's not the Mitchell Courthouse. It's 111 Calvert Street. That will be on the 20th at 9:30 before the Honorable Judge Barry Williams, which is also the judge with the Freddie Gray officers trial, who's amazing. He's awesome and very fair. We also have a Keith Davis Jr. Legal Defense Fund. You can go to fundraiser. That's that's fundrazr.com. And you can go into the search bar. It's probably easier to do that, to search for Keith Davis Jr. Legal Defense Fund. I believe that the reason why he was targeted is that the state's attorney, the city, knows that we're not rich. We have given our wedding savings and everything to the first trial and this trial, and they believe that he wouldn't be able to get his support, nor would he be able to afford a lawyer. So it's very important that if you can donate to the Legal Defense Fund, all of it goes to Keith's lawyers and his fighting this system again. Also, we have a fundraiser. We just had one April the 1st, which was amazing. We raised over $3,000. We have another one April the 28th. At Fifth Dimension. It is a Keith Davis Jr. Legal Defense Fund 2. It's the second one. So if everyone to continue the support and continue to educate people. That is, yes, we need money for his legal fund. Yes, these fundraisers are fun. But one of the things that I have always wanted to do was to let people know exactly what is taking place with Keith. He sent a letter home recently. I wish I had it on hand to read to you guys. Because at the end of the day, he is the sacrificial lamb. I believe had Freddie Gray survived, had Tyrone West survived, this is what they would be enduring. They would be thrown in jail on a laundry list of charges. They would have to fight this justice system, and their family, their finances, all would be in shambles. And I believe that this is the uprising. This is why, but this is the second part, because Keith's case has allowed us to go very hands-on into how this justice system works, how these police and civilian interactions and enforcement and police brutality cases work. Because unfortunately, with a Freddie Gray or a Tyrone West, they're deceased. That's it. The family files a suit. They're given a suit. They have a gag order where they want you to go away. And this has been something to happen where we see exactly what occurs. So
we'll put a link up on the on the Clearing the Fog page to the fundraiser, and so people can donate to this trust fund, this legal fund. Very important. So now that you've gone through this personally, you're now in the middle of this very personal hardship, and you look back at the uprising. Does it change? I mean, when you kind of described how you were just kind of watching it on TV, regular person watching it on TV, not really involved, which is typical. That's how most of life is. You're doing your own life. And now that you've been involved in this situation, how does that change your view of the uprising, and how does it change your view of getting involved in these kinds of efforts for justice?
It's changed significantly. I'm watching on TV, but that's the neighborhood that I grew up in. So that is where my story started. My parents moved me. Sorry, that's Keith's voice. He's my ringtone. But it has changed me because someone has to do something. It's not enough to just watch TV. It's not enough to be outraged. You have to put it to action. You have to continue to go. This system, this justice system, I always tell people that we're not outnumbered. We're outorganized.
Yeah, well said.
And the system has always been this way. It's always designed this way, which means they are organized. So instead of, I'm always overwhelmed at how many women that I meet when I go to visit Keith every week. And they're like, I told my husband to take a deal, or I told him this. We're conditioned to accept it. We're conditioned to allow it to happen. And I guarantee that if more of us stood up and more of us said no, if more of us were Keith, because Keith could have just folded like they wanted him to, like they intended him to. If we could just fight a little longer, something will change. And I believe that. So with this uprising, as ugly as some media try to make it, they're looting, they're stealing. That wasn't the case. There were people that were angry, and that they were tired, and they were tired of taking what was given to them, and they were tired of the relationship and the strain with this police department, and there was an opportunity to express that. And even when I confronted Ms. Mosby, it seemed like the feedback that I'm getting is, I'm glad somebody said something. So you have people who feel this way, but they don't know the avenues or the channels. And a lot of that comes from Baltimore Block. It is a group that helps me, when I was lost and didn't know where to go or where to turn, they found me. And that's been my platform, and they've given me the chance to be able to speak out. So it's not so much that people aren't willing to, is that they don't know how. Because all they know is, hey, if this is what they're giving us, this is what we take. So I believe that, don't. If you see something, speak about it. These officers, you think about all of the things that we catch on camera. Think about what we don't catch on camera. Think about what is taking place. The city of Baltimore, the relationship between the police department and its citizens is horrible. And according to my grandparents, my father, my uncles, it has been horrible. And now it is not getting any better. And I don't believe that the right elected officials are in place, are making it any better. I believe with the city of Baltimore politics is everyone has a price. Even if you come on and you want to be, you want to change, by then you can be brought out. As an educator, when you get out of school, you're immediately like, I'm going to make a difference. The politics of teaching make you feel like I'm burnt out and you don't want to make a difference. And then you got a teacher who doesn't care. If you're getting into it, stay in it. And I believe that politicians who have a personal strike in what goes on and have been through things like myself or Abdul or somebody like that's enough. But this uprising was commendable that those people were able to stand up before I could, before anyone else. And if it wasn't for their strength and their ability to say, no, we're not going to take it, I don't believe there would be a platform for people like me.
You're so right about they don't outnumber us, they out-organized us. And that is a big challenge, and our next guest will be talking about community organizing and how we can try to build our power. But I also want to say one other thing I want to get your feedback on is the police are just one of the problems. There's a disconnect between Baltimore city government, downtown development, and communities that are been neglected really for multiple generations. Yes. And in many ways, the police are there to contain those who've been, ignored or even abused by the economic unfairness of Baltimore. Do you think that people, my sense is they do, but I want to get your sense from someone from a different perspective. Do you think that people in these communities that have been so neglected and mistreated understand that the role of the police really is to contain the anger and...
Absolutely. I believe that's where the frustration comes in. People aren't dumb. People understand the way that you handle them, the way that you talk to them. And another thing is that a lot of these officers fear the very people that they're supposed to police. Then you have the fact that they fear them. You have the fact that they're supposed to contain them, and you have the fact that they're not properly trained to deal with most of the situations that they encounter. So, what do? It's aggression. That's it. That's all you know. And they have the upper hand within their position and their power, and then they utilize it in the most negative way. And you forget that these these are men that you're talking to in this way. You know, these are, so you wonder why people have such a sour taste in their mouth. It's because of the way that they're handled. No one wants to be handled. I guarantee you that if you treat these constituents with the same respect that they expect you to give them because they're law enforcement, you'll have a different relationship. You'll have a different dynamic. But like you said, they understand that they're being contained, and that's where the hostility comes from. You know, most people go through a phase of not liking authority, and if you assert your authority all the time and that's all that you do and that's all that you have, you're going to get negative ramifications 9 times out of 10. And that's what's happening. You know, no one's dumb, and that's the thing about people standing up. No one is stupid. We understand. We understand that the collusion between the Baltimore police and the state's attorney is deep. We understand she never meant to convict any of those officers. She just came for show. We understand since then all she's shown us is that she is inexperienced, immature, and not ready for this position. So there has to be a complete overhaul. We understand that the mayor has completely checked out of this city. That it wasn't just so much as saying, I'm not going to rerun. She has completely checked out of this city and what's best for the city. So it has to be a complete overhaul. And the next mayor that comes in, I know you guys have Josh Harris. One of the things that I've talked to him about is that you got to start from the ground up. And I commend the next mayor running to come into this race, but I also feel bad. Tough job. That's a tough job, because you're going to be damned if you do and damned if you don't, because you're going to have to come and rip everything apart, and it's going to cause you to make a lot of enemies, and a lot of people are resistant to change. They don't like change. So but it has to be done, and it has to start from everywhere. In the police defense, you can't clean that up and not clean up the state's attorney's office. You can't clean up the state's attorney's office, you can't clean up the mayor's office. You can't appoint civilian review boards when you got the same crooked people that's running it, and things of that nature. So absolutely, it's a tough place. Baltimore isn't a tough place. However, I believe that it is going to take the work of the people, the government, the police. It's going to take everybody. But in order to get there, respect has to be granted in the beginning. That has to be there. You have to respect each other. And at the rate this police force is going, I just seen it being a long way off. It's not saying that it can't be done, but I don't believe the steps have been made to start to turn it around.
Yeah, and well said. And I think that what your story shows is that what happened to Keith could really happen to anybody. I mean, you were planning to get married, and you're working, and still planning to get married, but you've now had to forego some of the deposits that you put down in planning for your wedding in order to fight, for Keith to get freed and get out of jail. So that's another reason why I really hope people will donate and support the Legal Defense Fund for Keith. But really, people who are watching it do need to get involved, because this is not disconnected from you. This could be you.
Very much. And I think that's the hardest thing, is that in the midst of it, you realize that. And I heard a lot of people tell me that people wouldn't care because Keith didn't die. No one's going to care. No one's going to take up his story because he didn't pass away. He's still here. But it can be you. It can be your loved one. I'm the mother of 2 sons. They will inherit this justice system. They will inherit this process. One of the things that Keith told me a long time ago, it was a conversation, and I said, I just don't want you to go to jail. And he said, I might have to, but I won't be there for long. I mean, that's a lie, because he's been there for a long time, but I won't be there for long. But he was thinking, just the processing. One of the times he told me, maybe I have to go through this. Maybe I have to go through this so that someone else doesn't, so that something changes in this process, so that no one else has to deal with this. And he's right. He's had to, in order for us to see how it works. So now we know where to go, because it really can be, it can be anybody. And you know, one of the things that when this happened, I kind of was excited, like, well, Marilyn Mosby's not going to allow this to happen. She's going to see to the bottom of this. The bottom line is that something went terribly wrong that morning. on June the 7th between Keith and the police officers. And by the time it got to the state's attorney's desk, she just kept the ball rolling. There has been no relief. And that's the only thing, is that it can happen to anybody, and we're still waiting for relief. But we're going to continue to fight so that it's not anybody. No one should get that call. I haven't slept in months. No one should be awakened like that. No other fiance should go through this. No other wife should go through this. So if it means that we have to do what we have to do, and we have to be the ones to endure, perhaps that's why we are, because we're strong enough to do it. So
yeah, and we have such admiration for your strength and the way that, you know, you've taken the hard road of fighting this, but you know, you won on those charges, getting those charges dropped, and now it's a matter of fighting this murder charge, this ridiculous murder charge. But your strength is just so remarkable. We just have so much respect for what you're doing, Kelly.
If you want to learn more about the Keith Davis case, you can check out on Popular Resistance. We have 3 articles, popularresistance.org. Just search Keith Davis, and we'll be putting up links on the Clearing the Fog website as well for more information. I think it's a case that deserves a lot of attention, and Keith is suffering a tremendous injustice that we're still trying to resolve, still trying to work through. So good luck getting through that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, and thank you so much. And don't forget to check out all of the information, how you can help, how you can support Keith, and just keep us in your thoughts and your prayers. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, and spread the word about Keith Davis's story so that people know. We're going to take a quick